Let's bring in our next guest, Jaroslava Barbieri, research fellow at the Ukraine Forum at the Chatham House think tank. Jaroslava, thank you very much for being with us here in France 24. We stand perhaps at a key point now for the future of Ukraine in terms of what happens next in this conflict, in terms of how America will support and in what sense that will happen and what role the Europeans are going to play as well. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you see this being, as one reporter put it in the White House, something like the end of the line for Ukraine? Or do you think this is actually the beginning of a new attack, a new era, a new sense of how Ukraine should be defended?
Good to be with you. I mean, I think a key problem in approaching this question is also Trump's erratic nature, because I would like to remind that ahead of the Putin-Trump summit in Alaska, Trump seemed to be siding with some of the red lines that had been put forward by Ukrainian and European leaders. And those red lines involved no acceptance of the forceful change of borders, and that Ukraine would have the right to choose which alliances to join, and that any meaningful peace negotiation would have to start with a ceasefire. And then immediately after the meeting in Alaska, Trump seemed to side more with Putin's interpretation and sequencing of steps. And so here we are at a turning point, and it's very important that European leaders have showed up in Washington to signal this strong united front to make sure that the US stays on board, because of course the US involvement in giving potential future security guarantees for Ukraine is essential for ensuring a durable peace. However, the contours of these potential robust security guarantees are not clear yet. So many say that we might be at a turning point. We might see real progress potentially in pushing forward negotiations. However, it's very clear now that Russia's maximalist objectives on Ukraine have not changed.
Indeed, Putin has made no concessions. He's been extremely consistent, the most consistent person. Well, Zelensky's been consistent too. He's constantly called for air defense. He's constantly called for assistance and constantly said Ukraine needs the help of the West and America in particular. So those two men, very consistent in their positions. Do you feel that Putin, in many ways, is pulling Trump's strings?
I think that it was a diplomatic masterstroke on Putin's side in Atlanta. Of course, you could see very clearly that he was trying to brush Trump's ego and reiterate some of the narratives that the US president really enjoys repeating. And what's problematic is that Trump came out of that meeting endorsing some of the lines that the Kremlin has been consistently pushing, and that would be incredibly harmful for Ukraine. And something else that is really surprising me, but in this period from Atlanta to Washington these few days, is that you can see that Trump has not just walked away from this idea of having a ceasefire as a key preconditions, but also the dimension of justice as a key component for ensuring a durable peace in Ukraine. It's completely absent from these conversations. Yes, the issue of Russia's illegal deportation of children is being raised. However, the dimension of war reparation is completely being ignored. And so I think, yes, there is movement. However, I think we're very far yet from achieving durable and just peace in Ukraine.
Indeed, that issue of war reparations, the reconstruction of Ukraine, of course, it is in some way, shape or form underway, even as the destruction that Russia wishes to put on Ukraine continues. I mean, today, as the discussions are taking place, air raid signs are going off in Kyiv. People are running to shelters, fearful for their lives. This continues, and is set to continue, isn't it, no matter what is actually said diplomatically today?
This is not surprising at all. This is a very typical Russia move to signal that it can get away with impunity and that it still can hold the cards. And so this is what's problematic, is that even in some of Trump's comment, you could see that evasiveness in terms of condemning Russia's actions. And so Trump is now in a situation in which he is very, very keen, as we know very well, to present himself as an effective peacemaker. And a key concern that Ukraine and its European allies have right now is that Trump might be shifting responsibility for ending the war in Ukraine rather than Russia, and possibly trying to push this so-called peace, land for peace deal as an acceptable resolution for ending the killing in Ukraine. But, even today there was this Trump post on Truth Social that said, Zelensky could end the war. And so you can see this pressure mounting up on Ukraine. The truth is that the killing could stop instantly if Putin decided to stop continuing its invasion. And so we're at a very delicate point right now, and it's very important again that European leaders have showed up to show this united front, to make sure that if indeed there were cracks in the transatlantic alliance that were to grow, giving disagreements in terms of how peace is meant to be achieved in Ukraine, Ukraine is not alone.
Indeed, because as you were saying, Jaroslava, and this is really interesting, Trump saying, that Zelensky could end the war just like that, in one gesture. That gesture would effectively be surrender, wouldn't it? Whereas Putin could actually stop his attack. And that would be a very different way of ending the war, and probably more valid and more meaningful thing to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the terms currently being on the table, that essentially equals to Ukraine's capitulation, and that is not acceptable, not just from the point of view of this not being a recipe for durable security and peace in Ukraine. It completely ignores the human dimension of people having lost their lives and sacrificed, make incredible sacrifices for defending these territories, but also its people. And so something that also particularly worrying about these high-level diplomatic discussion is that the dimension of the reality of Russia's occupation regime is completely absent. So when Trump is trying to push a land for peace deal, there is no conversation whatsoever about the human cost of Russia's occupation over the past 3.5 years. And I think this should change. And I hope that European leaders are able also to bring to the conversation also this very important dimension.
Jaroslava, whose voice among the European team is going to count for the most, do you think? Would it be Macron? Would it be Starmer? Would it be von der Leyen? How do you see this panning out?
I think there's no single voice that is more important than others. I think these different leaders have developed a positive type of relationship with Trump in different ways, and they want to become advocates perhaps for different dimension, but still all together they are meant to represent this united front in which this is not just a question about peace in Ukraine. This is about preserving European security as a whole with global implications, and that any conversations about how to end the war will have to have Ukraine and European leaders at the table, because it's a common shared priority. And so I think that is the really important message that European leaders are trying to bring in Washington today. Indeed.
Russia's casualties are over 1 million, according to the source I'm looking at. Ukraine clearly has lost many people. Donald Trump saying that he wants to get this war to end, and people are dying. And that is a fact that nobody can disagree with. I mean, clearly it is the aim to stop people dying. But nonetheless, Russia has a policy of just sending its troops into the battle and basically using them as cannon fodder. This is something that's happening. North Korean troops going there are suffering the same fate. The global scale of what we're seeing, the fact that things are growing, that is alarming many people. Many people looking at this and saying, well, this is a sign that things could get worse, could become inflamed. Other people are saying it's limited to an economic or a very limited military support situation. How do you see it?
This is, of course, an existential war now for both Ukraine and Russia. For Ukraine, because if Ukraine stopped fighting, it would cease to exist as a state, as a nation. But it has also become existential for the Kremlin, for the survival of its regime. The Kremlin has done an incredible miscalculation that reflected a profound misunderstanding of how Ukrainian society had changed, especially since 2014. And what's important to understand about the scale of human loss and human sacrifice, Ukrainians did not choose this. So all the sacrifices that Ukrainians have paid so far and are willing to continue to pay is because of this existential dimension. The dimension of sacrifice in Russia is very different. And when you look also at the type of indoctrination and militarization that the Russian government is trying to inject in the Russian schooling systems, that's also about the future that awaits Russia. You can see this dimension of sacrifice being around the importance of the readiness to die for the interests of the state. And I think that here we are seeing the two countries really approaching a completely different future and approaching very differently the value of human life. And I think that from a broader European perspective, making sure that the war ends on terms favorable to Ukraine has a dimension that is both security, economic, human. And so this is what is the big difference now compared to the first phase of this war back in 2014-15, that now Europeans have really internalized this idea that the destiny of Ukraine is very closely tied with the destiny of the future of Europe.
Jaroslava Barbieri, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you for your analysis, which we value greatly indeed. That's Jaroslava Barbieri of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House. Thank you once again. Straight to Kyiv.